Hi everyone, this is Mariam and today I'll walk you through 3 case studies. So spatio-temporal analysis is a powerful tool that helps us understand the underlying patterns and processes of ecological systems over both space and time. However, the presence of spatio-temporal autocorrelation or dependencies in data can affect the accuracy of statistical models and analysis of the results. To account for these dependencies, researchers often use spatio-temporal cluster analysis, which is a technique used to identify clusters or groups of locations with similar attributes or behavior over both space and time. It can be used to identify hotspots of species richness, areas of high conservation value, or areas of high risk for ecosystem degradation or species decline. In this presentation, we'll discuss the importance of spatio-temporal cluster analysis and its applications in ecological research. Conservation challenges are not limited to temporary solutions, and addressing the symptoms alone does not solve the underlying problem. So when marine mammals strand along the Indian coastline, reactive measures often result in temporary relief, followed by a return to business as usual. However, these strandings offer a unique opportunity for researchers to gather valuable information about the animal's health, life history, and potential causes of death. In this case study, they use spatio-temporal cluster analysis and statistical modeling to identify potential drivers and patterns of marine mammal strandings in India. To investigate spatio-temporal patterns and potential drivers of marine mammal strandings in India, they collated data over 270 years available through various open access databases, reports, and publications. They used descriptive statistics and cluster analysis to identify spatio-temporal patterns and hotspots of marine mammal strandings. They also used generalized linear models such as seasonality, distance from shore, sea surface temperature, and chlorophyll A concentrations as predictors of marine mammal strandings. The results of the study showed that there were several sections of the coastline with a higher number of stranded animals reported. Hotspots of marine mammal strandings were identified, and the timing of these events were determined. The use of cluster analysis in the study was important because it helped to identify areas of high stranding activity and provided insights into the potential drivers of these events. The study found that annual strandings along the Indian coast increased in the last 2 years of the study, with spikes in the stranding events during June to September along the west coast and during December to January along the east coast. Using the emerging hotspot analysis, they located new and consecutive hotspots along the northwest coast and sporadic hotspots along the southeast coast. The potential drivers of these events included sea surface temperature, sea surface height, chlorophyll A concentration, and fishing pressure. So the findings of the study have important implication for marine mammal conservation in India. The identification of these hotspots and the potential drivers of the strandings can help guide the establishment of regional stranding response centers and training programs for field veterinarians and other frontliners. Moving on to case 2. This study shows how a systematic conservation planning method based on future sea surface temperature projections, or SST, was used to locate favorable sites for the growth of high-latitude coral ranges in the face of climate change. By using spatio-temporal cluster analysis, the researchers identified regions with shared environmental characteristics and classified them into distinct groups to designate areas suitable for coral range expansion. They also used spatial autocorrelation analysis to identify spatial patterns in the distribution of SST and coral habitats, and temporal autocorrelation analysis to identify temporal patterns in the distribution of SST over time. The study then prioritized areas for 3 different scenarios, taking into account spatial and temporal connections among planning units. In scenario 1, they only looked at the spatial dimension, while in scenario 2, they considered both spatial and temporal connections within one time slice. And in scenario 3, they included spatial and temporal connections among multiple time slices. By including spatio-temporal connections into spatial prioritization, they were able to create conservation plans for marine life that considered the unique spatial and temporal dynamics of coral habitats in this region and facilitate the adaptability of marine ecosystems as SST rises. So this research has important implications for the future management of marine ecosystems, highlighting the importance of incorporating spatio-temporal dynamics into conservation planning. In case study 3, researchers employed spatio-temporal autocorrelation analysis techniques to investigate the age-dependent patterns of fish population. By using Moran's index and Geary's index, they explored how ecological variables are related to each other in space and time. Spatial and temporal autocorrelation is present when the values of a variable at one location in time are highly correlated with the values of that variable at nearby locations and times. So what they did was collect data on the spatial distribution of fish populations in a marine ecosystem by utilizing a combination of field surveys and remotely sensed data. So some of the data they had were fish abundance and size, as well as some of the physical and environmental characteristics of the ecosystem, in order to investigate the drivers of spatial patterns in fish populations. The results showed that younger fish populations exhibit stronger spatial autocorrelation than older fish populations. It suggests that these younger populations are more dependent on the spatial and temporal dynamics of ecological variables in the ecosystem. So variables such as water temperature and depth played a significant role in driving the age-dependent patterns that they saw. The figure presented in the study illustrates the spatial autocorrelation of fish population density for each studied species. The y-axis shows the correlation coefficient. The x-axis represents the distance. The green dashed line represents the spatial autocorrelation of the population density, while the dark and light blue lines represent the autocorrelation of the density of juvenile and adult fish, respectively. The smoothers represent the 95% confidence intervals obtained from parametric bootstrap analyses. So the analysis shows that the spatial autocorrelation and density differs across age groups within the same species, indicating the importance of species-specific life strategies in shaping population patterns. For example, in cod from the Barents Seas, spatial autocorrelation increases with age, while in the beaked redfish it decreases, and in haddock it remains constant within age classes. These divergent trends suggest that processes such as dispersal behavior, density regulation, trophic interactions, and habitat preference may vary significantly across age groups, leading to differences in spatial autocorrelation. Additionally, they found that the density distribution of a cohort in the previous year is progressively related to the autocorrelation patterns of older age classes of cod and haddock, which aligns with previous research showing that as individuals age, they become more resilient to environmental stresses and gain better access to prime foraging areas. These findings support the hypotheses that shifts in age structure can affect the spatio-temporal variability in the distribution of certain species. To conclude, the case studies presented here demonstrate the powerful insights that spatio-temporal analysis can provide in revealing complex ecological patterns and processes that might be hidden in static data. By considering the spatial and temporal dimensions of ecological systems, we can gain a better understanding of how species interact with their environment and develop more effective conservation management strategies. However, it's important to note that not all ecological mapping models integrate spatio-temporal autocorrelation or spatio-temporal analyses. This raises important questions about the implications of not integrating these kind of analyses into our models and how we can better incorporate it into our research and decision-making processes. One study emphasizes the need to consider spatial autocorrelation in ecological modeling, particularly in the context of climate change, as it can alter our forecasts and predictions. So as we continue to grapple with the complex and urgent challenges posed by climate change and biodiversity loss, spatio-temporal analysis will undoubtedly remain a vital tool in our toolkit. Thank you.